All right, let's get this party started. All right, PowerCLI 301, functions upon functions. This is a build off the 201 session. So if you didn't attend the 201 session, it's time to leave. No, I'm joking, we'll be fine. My name is Justin Sider. I'm the Chief PowerShell Officer at Belay Technologies, Chief Information Officer, but I really like PowerShell. So let's get this thing started. I'm gonna try and take it slow. I went through my 201 session really fast this morning, so I'm gonna try and slow down. Takeaways today: understanding pseudocode, how to write functions or write them better, and then how to put those functions together to create a PowerShell module. So I'm gonna go through all my slides, and then we're gonna start playing around with PowerShell live on my laptop. So we'll take it kind of nice and slow. Lots of terminology I'm gonna throw out at you. If you have questions, we have plenty of time. This is part 1 and part 2 all together. There's no part 2 technically. So if you're here, you're in it for the long haul. All right, actual agenda. We're gonna go over the PowerShell basics because I probably will be willing to bet that somebody doesn't know something about PowerShell. So we'll cover that real fast. We'll talk about functions, commandlets, advanced functions, modules, PowerShell gallery, of course. We'll review pseudocode before we jump into local modules, and then finally some live demo stuff. PowerShell 101, who uses PowerShell? Yes! PowerCLI. Notepad. Notepad++. Okay. PowerShell ISE. Why is everyone raising your hands for everything? Just pick one. How about VS Code? All right, good. So anyone who didn't say yes to VS Code, let's start making your way to VS Code. All right, it's gonna make your life easier. It's actively being developed. There's a PowerShell plugin there, and it's gonna help you write better code. Every module that's available will be able to have IntelliSense, autocomplete what you're doing, autocomplete parameters. It's the best thing ever. I don't know if my last slide had this on it or not. PS readline is also a very good PowerShell module. It does a lot of autocomplete in the console itself. PS readline, all one word. I think I have it on my last slide. All right. PowerShell 101, I'm sorry, we have to do it. Verb noun, get VM, shut down guest, VM guest, get process, verb, do something. There are approved verbs. Please use the approved verbs. I really like standardized PowerShell, so if you ever ask me to review your stuff, I'm gonna be mean if you don't use approved verbs. Objects, they are a collection of 3 types of data that represent an item. When you're in the console or the PowerShell console, and you are working with PowerShell, you are working with objects. With objects, we have an object type. What type of object is it? This is very important. You need to learn how to figure out what type of object you're working with, because there might be different methods and different properties available with different object types. In the 201 session, we talked about this and how the difference between a virtual machine implementation and a virtual machine object will have different methods available to you. All right. Did I say that? Go back a second. I'm just jumping back. So QR code takes you to the repository with all the examples from the 201 and 301, as well as these slides. So I'll show this again at the end, but I want to make sure you knew what that was. Not just some random QR code that people are asking you to click on. All right, PowerShell functions, what are they? They are just a list of PowerShell statements that has a name you assign. It's very much like a script. It's the same exact thing, except one you declare as a function and one you save as a file. Now, obviously, you have to save that function somewhere in a file, but they are exactly the same. That's it. Keep it stupid. That's the best way to write your code. And then a script might call many of those functions, right? So kind of like a little block diagram. I'm not very artsy, so this is what you get. We have a function called getVM. We have a function called shutdown VM guest. We have a function called setVM, and we have a function called startVM. Very basic functions that do one thing really well, and then we put them all in a script to perform a series of tasks, right? And that's what we're talking about, right? So we're going to start building functions, and then once we get done building the functions, we now have a script. We can also put all these functions into a module. So later today, we'll be talking about modules, how to build a module, how to maybe deploy that to the PowerShell gallery, maybe deploy that locally amongst your team. Functions do not need to be a verb noun. We already talked about that. Don't be that person. All right, commandlets, right? So, you're going to hear these things synonymously because people don't always understand the difference between a function and a commandlet. So let's talk about what they are. Commandlet is a .NET class. It's compiled. That's pretty much it. You're going to have it in C# or another .NET language, and it's going to be in a DLL. So if you were to take a look at the PowerCLI files, when you download the module, these are commandlets. These are all compiled code the PowerShell team writes for you, and you don't have to worry about looking at it. It's not native PowerShell. It's all C#. That's why it's never went open source. But so it's not plain text. It's a pain in the ass. Take a deep breath because we don't have to talk about it. I'm a huge fan of Ted Lasso. He's awesome. All right, advanced functions. They just make it easier to create commandlets without compiling anything. Is that confusing? A little bit, right? Because we just talked about not compiling functions. They use a commandlet binding attribute so that they act like commandlets. So they give you built-in features that you wouldn't normally have in a function. It just makes life easier. I suggest just Googling this term. You'll learn a lot about it. There's tons and tons of documentation out on the Microsoft website for PowerShell. They do a really good job. We can't quite cover everything here today. Modules, while we're here. A module is a self-contained, reusable unit that can include commandlets, providers, functions, variables, and other things that can be imported into PowerShell, such as classes, C# classes. The things you need to know is that when you write your own modules, you'll have functions. I suggest just making them all advanced functions. You get things like what if right out of the box. And then you have variables. We have two different types of modules, native, which is going to be compiled, and script module, which is plain text. Simple as that. What makes up a module? Pretty much two things, a PSD1 and a PSM1, right? Two file extensions. Your PSD1 is their module manifest, tells you everything you might need to know about the module. Your PSM1, you have two different options. Throw all your functions into it, or write a little bit of code and you can put all of your functions into individual files and do a public and private, or if you just want public, that's fine. You're going to learn today you don't actually need a PSD1 to create a module. It's just kind of a nice thing to have. Who knows what the PowerShell gallery is? Hooray! Who hosts their own internal PowerShell gallery for their team? You don't seem so sure. Yes or no? Okay, so you have a place where you can go get them, but it's not necessarily like a PowerShell repository. It's not a NuGet repository. Okay, so we obviously have the PowerShell gallery. That's an internet-facing repository. There's tons of stuff in there, scripts, modules, and DSC resources. Anybody use DSC? It's terrible, don't do it. And then, yes, you can host your own local one. I use Nexus Sonatype. It just provides a web front end and all the things you need to provide a NuGet repository. Artifactory also does it, but you have to pay for that normally. There might be a free tier, but I don't really know a whole lot about it. So Nexus is super easy to set up. Yes? There is a free Nexus. You can also pay for it, but you don't need to. The piece of Nexus that you would need to pay for is about like replication if you had multiple sites and some advanced features. But in order to just set up a local PowerShell gallery in your local area network, you can spin it up as a container, you can spin it up as a virtual machine, install it, runs on Windows, runs on Linux, whatever you're comfortable with. There are some pretty good YouTube videos and blog articles out there that can show you how to do that locally. It's not super hard. All right, pseudocode. I've done a whole presentation on this back when we had COVID, and there was everything was online for VMworld at the time. It really just uses simple language to break down what you're trying to do, right? So I have a couple guys at work. They're the snake, right? I'm like, hey, can you write a script that will go do this thing inside of VMware, right? And like 3 weeks later, I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, well, I tried to do all these things. And I was like, all right, well, just break it down, right? Go to a whiteboard, go to Notepad, and just start writing down what you want this thing to do. We're going to take a look at this in a few minutes. and show you what my pseudocode was going into this little exercise we're going to walk through. All of those pseudocode statements, normal human written language, can then turn into your inline comments. It does it for you. It's like, have you ever heard of like test-driven development where you're supposed to do the test first? Right? Well, this is like logic-driven development. Figure out what you want it to do before you just start doing something. And then we have our cute little bird of prey here, right? He's going to pick apart every little piece and make sure he knows what he's doing before he moves on to the next one. All right. The demo today, demo environment. That was weird. Turns to colors. All right. I have my laptop. I have my PowerShell console. I am doing 5.1. There was a question earlier today about PowerShell, Linux, different versions. So I'll hit that real quick. Windows PowerShell 5.1 pretty much comes on every Windows 10, Windows 11 machine ever invented or ever deployed. PowerShell 6 is pretty much dead. It was the first Linux distribution, and it's probably used more than you would expect. And then PowerShell 7, which will run on Windows or Linux. And do people run PowerShell on Linux? Yes, all the time. I was talking to one of the folks up here. They have it on their Mac. So you can use it on a Mac. You can use it on Linux. And it can run in containers. You can just download the PowerShell containers straight from Microsoft or straight from the Docker Hub or whatever they call it now. So today, we're running PowerShell 5.1. We have Docker Desktop running a vCenter simulator so that when we start doing our functions and running scripts that are exercising our module, it has a little vCenter emulator to mess with. All right. I went through a lot of stuff. Questions, terminology. Do you hate it? We love PowerShell. All right. Love PowerShell. Love PowerCLI. All right. So first thing I'm going to do, I am going to try and find where this starts. So this code here just fires up Docker, fires up the vCenter simulator, shows nothing there. Come on, where's the help? You let me down. All right, so this code here, it's just starting up the Docker container. Once it starts up, it grabs the IP address of the container, sets that as a variable so that I can log into the vCenter, quick username, password, and you're in. Cool, and then we just print out the connection. There we are. Let's see. How many people have messed with modules other than just installing PowerCLI? Cool. All right. So we're going to run through some things that might be redundant. You might know this stuff already. Yes. So dependent upon your environment, so a nice young gentleman here said I should be using get credential instead of hard coding something in a script. 100% agree. It's totally demo. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I would even say you shouldn't even use get credential. It should be stored in a vault somewhere, right? And then you should have a local cached, maybe hashed password that can reach out to the vault, right? Yes. Yeah, and there's some good functions out there that'll encrypt your password locally. Well, different conversation for a different day. All right, let's get this thing going. All right, so one command, you probably do this quite a bit, but you may not understand the importance of the git module command, right? So if you load up a brand new terminal and you run git module, you'll have like 1 or 2 modules listed. The really cool thing is if you start running commands, PowerShell is going to go out and automatically load the modules that it needs in order to run those commands. So for connecting to the vCenter, you see that it pulled in some of the vCenter modules, or some of the PowerCLI modules, but not all of them, right? I don't know how many PowerCLI modules there are or submodules, but you notice it didn't pull them all in. It didn't say import module VMware.PowerCLI. It just pulled in the modules needed with the commands. Let's see. We also have the net TCP IP, and that was to get the IP address earlier. So it's really cool if you're trying to figure out what module is running what commands maybe out of somebody else's script or something like that. Just like a diagnostic kind of tool. All right. We can also remove modules if you want. So that's fun. I don't know why REST PS is in there, so let's remove that one. All right, so remove the module, and now it's gone. Fantastic. All right. So my next two lines here, this is where we're importing a module. So as I said before, you can have a module, and you can just import the PSM1, or you can import the entire PSD1. So I'm going to show you what it looks like with different ones, and then we can go look at the module itself. So if I run this command and import the module, nope. And then I run a git module. I can't type today. You can see that we imported my module 0.0. It's not super useful. All right. And I'm going to import it with the PSD1. Doesn't like that. Given code name. That's exciting. Would you believe I ran this like an hour ago and it worked fine? Let's take a look at it. Let's see what we got. All right. I have a feeling it might be a path issue. Huzzah. All right. I am a hero, yes, the PowerShell hero. Okay, so I removed that module. It fixed my path issue. You shouldn't probably change your whole directory structure like 2 days before you're presenting and forget stuff. But you can see, so the first time we imported the PSM1, it was version 0. So here it's version 1, right? So the PSD1, you can program or put items in there that describe your module that you're not going to get out of your PSM1. There's a ton of stuff in the module manifest, the PSD1. We can certainly continue and take a look at that, which is kind of a mess. Let me do this. Let me do this. So there's a ton of stuff in here. Not all of it is useful, right? So root module, that's going to be where the file is. Module version, you can set that to be whatever you want. If you make changes to your module, you can update that to let people know that when they pull your module down, they're getting a newer version. Let's see. Company unknown, all rights reserved. That's right. Don't use my stuff. Functions to export. This is going to be useful. So if you're just using your PSM1, you can't restrict what functions will be public or available to everyone versus private. Aliases. We don't do aliases. We talked about that earlier. So that for the most part, some of this stuff is useful and some of it isn't, right? Help URI, that's something I might put in there. I might direct somebody to my blog or something like that. No big deal. All right, that's enough for the PSD1. Okay, so we listed the module. All right, another useful command, listing out the commands in a module. Function fate. So now you can specify and find out what are the commands that are available for this module. You can obviously filter this command as well. So it's nice, you can see exactly what is in here. And you can see what version that they are a part of. So If you somehow imported 2 modules of the same version, you would see that maybe a new command came in under version 1.1. So semi-useful. Hopefully you won't have a bunch of versions and you won't import a bunch of different module versions. That seems kind of messy to me. All right. Comment-based help. We focused on this a little bit in the last session. So if you're writing functions, you should have comment-based help. So starting here, we have a name, we have a syntax. This is how you use the command. No parameters for this one, which seems a little odd. Maybe I didn't document that. Remarks. All right. What is next? Yeah, that's a good point. I don't currently use ChatGPT or Copilot, but they can definitely help you out. All right, so we already removed the module. So before we run the script, let's take a look at what the script is. And this is changing. I wish I had like 13 monitors right now. All right, so the first thing, I wouldn't normally leave a big code block of comments at the top for my pseudocode, but this is what I would look like, or what it would look like if you saw me write pseudocode to do a task. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a list of virtual machines based on a search term. I'm going to get the number of VMs in that list and display it. I'm going to set the counter to 0. I'm going to loop through all the VMs that I found. When I'm in that loop, I'm going to power off the virtual machine. I'm going to update the CPU. I'm going to power that VM on. I'm going to update the counter, display the number of VMs that has been updated so far. And then when the loop is done, give the final number of VMs updated. So you might be thinking like, why? Why did you write all of that? Because it's clear to me. It's clear to me exactly what this thing is doing, right? And then as we scroll down, you'll see that I just take those comments, turn them into, or I take those words and just turn them into code comments. So now I know what every line of my code is going to be doing. So as we scroll down, you see different information. We get the list of virtual machines. We write out the number of total virtual machines because we want to know how many there are. We start our counter, and then for each of those VMs that we found, we stop the VM, we update the CPU, we start the VM, and you'll notice that I'm using not PowerCLI here. I'm using my own names of functions. So we're going to dive into our module real quick and take a look at that. And then we get the final number, and then we display all the final deets. So let's take a look at our module. So this is the module that I wrote for the demo. So we have a function called writeMyLog. We have a parameter block looking for a message. We determine whether or not the message is empty. If the message is empty, that's probably going to be a problem. Why would you ever call write this log message if you're not actually passing in a message? We throw an error in that case. Otherwise, we're going to write out the message using write host, which we know is not a very nice thing to do. All right, searching for VMs. I use the approved verb find. We're looking for a VM. We have a search term as a parameter. We determine whether or not the search term is empty. Throw an error if that's the case. Otherwise, we're going to search using getVM to find the VMs that match that search term. And then we're going to return VM list back out of the function. All right, turning off the VM. This is going to be similar to what the script looked like in the 201 session. We're just using a little bit different here. So we have stop my VM. We have a parameter called VM. I don't specify whether this is a string or a VM object. You can do that if you want to be a little bit more specific. We determine whether or not that VM name is empty, throw an error if it is, because we don't need to try and power it off. And then what we do here is we actually check the power state of the VM that's being passed in. You notice that I get the data. I always get the data. Do I get the data? VM name? No, this may or may not work. That's interesting. So I determine if the VM's powered on. I think the first pass makes sense. The script has it in there. All right, so first pass, we determine whether or not the VM's powered on. If it is powered on, we will go ahead and turn it off. If it's not powered on, we don't need to turn it off. So we just skip that part. All right. Updating the virtual machine CPU. It's, again, I don't know this is the best name for a function, but it works for me for today. So we determine whether or not we actually got a VM passed in. If not, we throw an error. Next step is we get the VM state. So this is where I was talking about. So we get the VM state. I want to know right before I run this command whether or not the VM's powered on or powered off. Right. So unless you have on-the-fly CPU adjustment enabled, this will fail if you try to do it to a VM that's powered on. So if it's powered on, we say, hey, I can't do this. And then if it's powered off, we go ahead and make the change. I also check to see if what you're trying to change the CPU to matches the existing VM, right? Why would I make a change to the VM if I don't need to? I should probably do that before I power it off. That's why you're looking at me funny, right? Yeah. All right, and then we have start RVM. So similar power off. If it's already powered on, I don't need to power it on. So we're checking for that. Again, I need to do that right away. I don't want to reuse an old VM object. And then we power the VM on. So these are all functions. These are part of the module. This is what I imported into my PowerShell session because I like a little more control over what PowerCLI has done for us. So switching back over to our script, you can see our script is pretty simple. And we just loop through the VMs. We're going to output some stuff. Fuck you. So let's give it a try. All right. Where's the little bar? So let's make sure the module is in there. Oh, I just ruined that. All right, so my module 1.0 is in there, so it has all the functions that are available to us. So let's go ahead and run the script. Function. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Boop, boop. All right, so we listed out the VMs. We started our counter. We have a total of 2 VMs that match the search term. The search term, I don't remember what we named the search term. And then we go through, we're gonna power them off. So you can see beforehand, they all had 1 CPU. Afterwards, we have 2 and 2. I'd have to look at the script to see what the search term was, but I think it was RP0. So super cool, super easy. All right, let's see. All right, let's run it again. Right, so super fast. We didn't have to wait. We didn't have to power anything off. The VMs are already at the right number of CPU. So no big deal there. And I mean, we can run it as many times as we want. So this is kind of where we get into like error handling, some of that thought process, the pseudocode, things that you would run through it if you were to do it manually. All right. So adding a function. So we have our function, which is great. Get out of this one. Open this guy up. I very intelligently added a module number 2. It's literally just a copy and paste of module with no number because I'm consistent with my naming scheme. And I have some notes here on how to add a function. So I'm just going to copy and paste some stuff, but I'll walk you through it. Right. So module version, we want to change it to 2.0 because we're going to add a new function to this module called update memory. So we need to update the module to number 2. And we are already in 301, so that's good. So I updated this path. That's interesting. All right. Add a function. All right, so we need to update our functions to export. So if we're adding a new function, we need to know to export that function so that people can use it. Otherwise, you've done a lot of work for no reason. So I'm just going to copy this function, and we will add it to the module manifest, which is down here, comma, paste, good to go. And then the last part is we need to copy the actual function. All right, so similar to the CPU, the only thing I did was kind of change the memory out. Holy crap. All right. So we're going to take that. We're going to add it to the bottom of the PSM1 as soon as I can find the end of it. All right, so saved all that stuff. Go back to this. And then we can import our module. No errors this time. All right, so we get our module. We now have module 2, which is our 2.0 version. We could have updated the one in place, but for demo purposes, I didn't want to screw things up too badly. If we do git command module, and it should be an _2, we can see that we have the update VM memory command now available to us, which means we can run our fancier script. Which is over here. Nope, I lost it. Hang on. Yeah, it's stupid. All right, path. All right, so now it's a new script. In that script, we're updating the memory as well. So now we have virtual machines with 99, where's my headers? So 99 CPUs and 100 gigs of RAM. So big VMs, big VMs. Go ahead. Seems, yeah, I mean, the developers are going to ask for it, right?
That's what the vendor documentation says.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Oracle, right? All right. So let's see. I think for the most part, that is the majority of the demonstration on how we have modules, functions, how they build up, how you import them, how you can add to them. I don't have a local Nexus repository where I could deploy this, but you could. For me, module writing, function writing is all about creating reusable code, right? So we all have coworkers, I hope. If not, you're a single point of failure, and that really sucks. Otherwise, you should be sharing your code, right? There's no reason that the two people should be writing the same script. So share your code, write reusable code, use the pseudocode, and then use an internal PowerShell gallery to share that stuff out. It's super simple to set up. You'll need an API key. You just publish the module, and then everybody can download it. If you want to get really, really fancy, you can set up something like Jenkins, and it can take a look at your code repository if you're using Git, whether it's lab or hub. So Jenkins can watch GitLab. It can see a commit that you make on your code. It can do the whole process of building your module and then deploying it to a PowerShell gallery, whether it be the public or whether it be an internal. I think I have a few more notes in the slides. So we'll see what we got here. All right, script analyzer. We talked about script analyzer earlier. So you should be running this against all of your scripts. It'll give you best practices against your scripts. You have the option. So there's a prescripted set of rules that the PowerShell community as a whole is adopted. You are able to, in your system, exclude certain rules. So global variables is one. Working with PowerCLI, you're going to use global variables. It's just going to happen. So you can exclude that one from a list, or when you see it, you can just ignore it. These scripts I wrote today, they would pop on write host. They don't want you to use write host. Pester is a topic. Anybody used Pester before? A couple of you. So Pester is a unit testing framework for PowerShell. So this is going to go through and basically check off that pseudocode that everything's working correctly. So essentially, you're writing PowerShell to check your PowerShell, which seems kind of weird, but it works really well. If you want to stick around, I can show you some examples of it on what I do for some of the modules I write that are public, and you can see that there's a lot to it. There was an adjustment. They had, I think Pester 5 is one of the latest versions out there. It's really confusing. I like Pester 4 a little bit better. Same functionality, just a little bit easier to understand. I haven't really made the move to 5 yet. And then we talked briefly about PS readline. And that's doing auto-completion not only in your terminal, but it can also do it inside of VS Code. So highly recommend people use VS Code. The first thing you should do is install PS Readline. As soon as you start writing scripts, functions, you need to jump on Script Analyzer. It'll save you a lot of trouble. You'll find a lot of things that you do are going to be against what PowerShell says you should do, or the community as a whole. Just little things like if you're evaluating something against null, it wants null to be first, not the object you're comparing. Stupid things like that that we've learned over the years. So with that, we still have about 10 or 15 minutes. I can take questions. This is going to give you a link to the code, the deck, anything you need there. There's tons of stuff out on my GitHub repository. All of my open source code for, you have to drill up a little bit, but all my modules that I push out there. So I have a bunch of different modules that are PowerCLI related, non-PowerCLI related, PowerShell related, a bunch of fun stuff. So any questions or comments based on what you've seen today? Let's go.
So you're talking about how when you're comparing to null, you have null first.
Yeah.
Right? But then when you are comparing the number of virtual CPUs versus how many it already has, you have the other. So you have like, if null is equal to V and name, then you said if V inverse CPUs is equal to
all right, so he's asking me, why did I compare things in an opposite way? So null is a special thing in PowerShell, and they want you to put that first no matter what. It's really confusing to me when I'm writing PowerShell it is counterintuitive, so I do it reverse on everything else because to me it's normal language. Yeah, I don't have a good answer on, there's a whole like blog article on why you put null first. It's just one of the weird things that kind of stuck out to me. Yep. Yep.
Can you bring the question I was asking? Can you bring a page where the questions are from?
Ping a.
Can you bring the
Oh yeah, yeah. I can see my finger. All right, where exactly were we going?
You use the wrong word. It's GitHub, not WordSell.
Why does it switch back and forth? Why isn't it smart enough? All right, so he was specifically asking about checking for null. So PowerShell, if you run Script Analyzer, if I was to switch these and take the object or the comparing item against null, it would tell me that I did something wrong and it hates me. So null should always be first when you're evaluating it against an object. And what he was saying was, well, then why down here did you reverse your thinking logic, right? So I'm trying to compare it against something that already existed, right? So null technically exists. So when I'm thinking about, hey, check if this is empty, not, hey, check if this empty is matching this other thing.
null and empty are two different things. So you need to compare what.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I'm comparing it against null here as an empty object. I'm not checking to see whether it equals nothing, right? So you could add a second check in here that looked like, right? So this is similar. You will get a lot of negative experiences trying to compare something to an empty quote set. So null and an empty quote set are going to be two separate things. One of them is setting you up to see if there is no string, and then the other one's checking to see if the object is empty or not empty. Will not compare whether it is empty or not. Empty or null.
So like if you do like if VM is not equal to null,
No, if not, yeah.
Oh, like execution.
Yeah.
But then you're using an alias, and it's going to yell at you for that too. Yeah, so exclamation is, so you could do hyphen not, but to me that defies language. That seems really confusing to me if I'm writing it that way. And he was just kind of bringing up like why I, when I'm looking at my code and I'm thinking about my code, why do I reverse those things? I always see it as I'm comparing this to this, and null is the only exception where it's the other way around. Cool. What other fun things do you run into? Problems with PowerShell coding? You look like you want to ask a question. You good? Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about grabbing the output of a function and using it for something else? Yeah, so you're supposed to move my mouse, man. That's not mine. The funny thing is, like, it's shut. So I don't know what's going on. Earlier today, I showed like it's set to not go to sleep ever, the screen or the computer. So all right. So one, modules are not complicated. Like what I showed you today, you're literally just writing little functions, putting them into a file, and then you just reference that file in order to get access to the functions you've written. So don't let the idea of the PowerShell gallery using Nexus as a repository think that this is a hard thing to do, right? You writing a script and executing a script is the same thing as importing a module, a list of functions, a list of commands. It really is simple. The PSD1, only if you're publishing that do you really need the PSD1. Otherwise, you can take a module and put 1,000 functions in it, copy that, hand it to your coworker, and they can import it as well, right? I mean, I recommend using GitHub or something where you can kind of collaborate on it, but it's really writing native script-based modules is not complicated. You're probably already doing it with large scripts. I'm just suggesting you break those scripts down into functions and make it a little bit more modular.
Literally, the only difference is instead of dot sourcing a PS1 file, we just call it function. It's the exact same thing. You take the entire PS1 file and put it inside of the function. It would be a bad idea. But you could do that and then just call that function. That way, the dot source.
Yeah. Let me jump behind you real quick. Yeah. You might need to speak up a little bit. It's okay to yell at me. Yes.
So I'm looking for the parameter comes empty or null. This covers both scenarios.
Okay. Hang 1 second. Let me grab this. So you're asking whether or not to compare something to null. You're asking like what do I prefer, or?
So you got right there. String.
Okay.
String is no longer entry.
All right. So the question that they're asking and what they're referencing. So they have a string object, and they're using a method to determine whether or not that is null or empty. So you could do it either way, right? You could check it against null, like I was doing here, or you could use a method. The issue that you might run into, and what I didn't really call out here, is that VM, whether it's a VM or whether it's the VM name, right? So if you're going to start to use methods in that manner, you need to make sure that your parameters are defined as they come in. Otherwise, you could potentially call a method against a object that doesn't have that, right? So you would want to make sure that you're declaring your variable types and you know that those variable types will have the methods available so that you can execute a search like that. And then I would say that when you start doing that, you're starting to dive into like C# versus just native PowerShell, right? So then you're starting to mix what you're doing. Neither one is wrong. All right. So now we're back to this one.
I think it's the same thing. Instead of specifying null or empty, I'm just saying if the object is not.
Right. So what he's asking now, he has if, and then in parentheses, -not, $ variable name, right? The question is, I don't know what it's comparing, right? Because
It's comparing both. Just saying if null or empty.
right, but what if I would be interested to test that to see if I establish the database. So in this case, it was $DB. If I created a null DB variable, I don't know whether that would consistently pass or fail.
That would fail. If the variable exists, it's equal to null.
Right. Yeah. So you're not like the not is not necessarily comparing whether or not there's something in there or not. I wouldn't trust that. Is all I'm saying. It might work 90% of the time. I'd be interested to see. We can play around with it. I got a couple minutes. Got a couple minutes? It's updating, okay?
Hopefully it's updating PowerShell.
I would love to know what the setting is. All right, let's get a new file. Nope, file. I don't know, just give me a new file. I don't even know what I'm saving. All right. Language. PowerShell. Love it. All right. So we're saying if I have a object, so .db, and then yours was if -not $DB. Right, so this is kind of what we're talking about, right? So kind of curious to see what this does. So let's give it a shot. What is that crap? What did you do? No, you. I hate laptops. Dude, I hate laptops. So this says it's inside the if, right? So, all right. So now let's mess around. Let's. So we're back in, right? So we set it to null.
Set it to single quotes.
Still inside.
This is a cleaner way.
So the comment was, this is a cleaner way. Hang on, let's do some more testing. Right, so now we're in the else, so that was expected. I want to run this one now. So now we're back inside the if. So I set it back to nothing, and it's doing that. So that's interesting. All right, so let's do this. File, save as. let's go into CD CLI 301. Why? Underscore. Yeah. Terrible naming convention. Yeah, so it doesn't complain about it. It likes it. I don't know that I would ever do it that way. I don't like not. What about you? Anybody else? Not? They like it? They don't like it? Why would it be necessary? All right, so the comment was that sometimes the positive would be more onerous to check than seeing if a thing is negative. I can buy that. All right. Okay. Okay. So my question would be, would you ever use would you ever use not in this specific example to see if $DB is empty? Okay. You would? Right, so he was saying if something existed or not. Dude, one more day of this, one more day. That's it, that's just it, that's it. But I would say that's not checking whether or not it's empty, you're checking to see whether something exists, right? So your return might be empty. So in that case, I would do some error handling in my script to see if the function returned or not, right? But cool.
Check if instead of not, and then stop the if else. Instead of
For positive or negative, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that's the beauty of PowerShell is that everybody kind of has a different way. I think as long as it passes PS script analyzer, you're free to do the funky check, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'll be here tomorrow morning. You want to come up and present? So I think that's it. I mean, if there's no other questions or funky things we want to look at, then thanks for hanging out. No.